A picture-perfect life, a Fifth Avenue penthouse, and a love story the world envied. That was the life of Serafina Rothschild until a single headline shattered the illusion. Billionaire Alistair Rothschild's mistress pregnant. The city gasped, expecting a quiet settlement. But they underestimated Serafina. When she filed for divorce, the titan of industry who brought markets to their knees was brought to his own begging on the marble floors he once commanded. This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's a saga of a woman who refused to be a footnote in her own life. Stay tuned as we unravel the shocking twists and betrayals that prove even in a world of unimaginable wealth, some things are priceless. Serafina Rothschild moved through the grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Museum of Art with the practiced grace of a queen surveying her court. The annual Rothschild Foundation Gala was the undisputed crown jewel of New York City's philanthropic calendar, a night where old money and new technology mingled under the soft glow of bespoke chandeliers. Every detail, from the cascading orchids that seemed to drip from the ceiling to the Michelin-starred chef personally overseeing the canapés, bore her meticulous touch. To the outside world, she was the impeccably dressed, ever-smiling wife of the enigmatic billionaire Alistair Rothschild. She was the envy of millions, the woman who had it all. Alistair, a man whose name was a synonym for power in the financial world, stood across the room, a veritable king holding court. He was effortlessly charming, his Savile Row suit hugging his athletic frame as he laughed with a senator and a tech mogul. His dark hair was just beginning to be kissed with silver at the temples, a distinguished touch that only added to his allure. From this distance, they were a portrait of power and perfection, the golden couple of the global elite. But Serafina knew the truth. The gilded cage was still a cage. Their life, once a whirlwind of genuine passion and shared dreams, had slowly, almost imperceptibly cooled into a contractual arrangement. The spontaneous trips to their private island in the Grenadines had been replaced by meticulously scheduled appearances at charity events. The whispered secrets in the dead of night had given way to the sterile silence of their sprawling Fifth Avenue penthouse, a space so vast they could go a full day without crossing paths. Serafina adjusted the strap of her vintage Dior gown, the deep sapphire silk a perfect match for the legendary Rothschild sapphire that rested against her collarbone. The necklace was a wedding gift from Alistair, a symbol of his supposed eternal love, now feeling more like a beautiful heavy collar. She exchanged pleasantries with a dowager whose family had come over on the Mayflower, her smile never faltering, her wit sharp and engaging. She was an expert at playing the part. She had to be. The first tremor that threatened to shatter her carefully constructed world came not from a dramatic confrontation, but from the insidious glow of a smartphone screen. A young, ambitious journalist from a lesser-known society blog, eager to make a name for herself, held up her phone to an acquaintance nearby. Serafina's gaze, ever observant, caught a glimpse of the headline before it was quickly angled away. But it was too late. The words had already burned themselves into her mind. Isabella Ricci, rising starlet, hints at $1 billion baby bump. Sources close to the actress say the father is one of New York's most powerful married men. The accompanying photo was a paparazzi shot of a stunningly beautiful young woman with fiery red hair and a defiant pout, her hand resting protectively on a barely there swell beneath a clingy dress. Isabella Ricci. Serafina knew the name. She was the latest it girl, an actress with a string of minor roles and a major talent for self-promotion. Alistair had recently invested in her latest film, a gritty, independent drama he'd praised as a bold new voice in cinema. He had attended the premiere with Serafina, of course, but he had also attended numerous production meetings, late-night script reviews, and celebratory dinners, alone. A cold dread, sharp and unwelcome, snaked its way up Serafina's spine. It was a familiar feeling, one she had been suppressing for months, even years. The late nights he'd attributed to closing a deal in Tokyo, the faint, unfamiliar scent of perfume on his shirts, the sudden and frequent business trips to Los Angeles, where Isabella was based. She had chosen to believe his lies, to accept his plausible explanations. It was easier that way. To confront the alternative was to risk detonating the very foundations of her life. She excused herself from the conversation with a polite nod, her heart hammering against her ribs. She needed air. Making her way toward the less crowded Egyptian wing, she felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on her. The whispers had already started a ripple of speculation spreading through the gala like a contagion. Was it true? Did she know? How would she react? She was no longer just Serafina. She was a spectacle. She found a quiet alcove behind a towering statue of Sekhmet, the warrior goddess. Leaning against the cool stone, she pulled out her own phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed Isabella Ricci's name into the search bar. The blog post was now the top result, already being picked up by more mainstream gossip sites. The comments section was a viper's nest of innuendo and thinly veiled accusations. Everyone knows it's Alistair Rothschild, the way he looked at her on the red carpet. Poor Serafina. She's so classy. She doesn't deserve this. Please, she knew what she was signing up for. It's a transaction. Each word was a small, sharp blade. The last comment stung the most, because it echoed a fear she secretly harbored. Had their love story, the one that had captivated the world, truly been reduced to a mere transaction? She remembered their beginning, a chance meeting at an art gallery in Paris. He hadn't been the Alistair Rothschild, then just a brilliant, hungry young financier, with a spark in his eye that promised adventure. He had pursued her relentlessly, not with grand, empty gestures, but with thoughtful conversations, shared laughter, and an intensity that made her feel like the only woman in the world. He had loved her. She was sure of it. But when had that love curdled into complacency? Her phone buzzed in her hand. It was a text from her best friend, Genevieve, a sharp-witted art dealer who had never fully trusted Alistair. "So you seeing this, call me the second you leave that circus. Don't let them see you sweat." Genevieve's words were a lifeline, a reminder that she wasn't entirely alone in this gilded cage. Taking a deep, shaky breath, Serafina smoothed down her gown, straightened her shoulders, and composed her features into a mask of serene indifference. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. She would walk back into that ballroom, head held high, and play her part to perfection until the final curtain fell. As she re-entered the main hall, she saw Alistair looking for her, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Concern. Or was it guilt? He strode towards her, his public smile firmly in place. "There you are," he said, his voice a low murmur, meant only for her. "I was getting worried. Everything all right?" Serafina met his gaze, her own eyes as cool and impenetrable as the sapphire at her throat. She gave him a small, enigmatic smile. "Everything is perfect, darling," she replied, her voice smooth as silk. "Absolutely perfect." But as he led her back into the throng, his hand resting on the small of her back, she knew it was a lie. Nothing was perfect. and nothing would ever be the same again. The tremor had become a quake, and the foundations of her world were beginning to crack. The public humiliation was just the beginning. The real drama, she suspected, was about to unfold behind the closed doors of their Fifth Avenue palace, and it would be a storm of epic proportions. The ride home in the back of the custom-built Maybach was a masterclass in silent warfare. The cavernous space, usually a sanctuary of plush leather and hushed comfort, felt suffocating. The soft hum of the engine was a roar in the oppressive silence that stretched between Serafina and Alistair. He kept glancing at her, his jaw tight, his fingers drumming a nervous rhythm on his knee. She kept her gaze fixed on the glittering tapestry of New York City's skyline as it slid past the tinted windows, each familiar landmark now looking alien and old. "Are you going to say something?" Alistair finally broke the silence as the car purred to a stop in the private subterranean garage of their building. Serafina turned to him, her expression unreadable. "What is there to say, Alistair? The internet seems to have said it all." Her voice was devoid of emotion, a calm, flat tone that was far more unsettling than any shriek or sob could have been. "It's gossip, Serafina. Lies spun by a desperate girl looking for a payday." He said, his voice laced with a dismissive arrogance that grated on her already frayed nerves. "You know how these things work. You can't possibly believe it." "Believe what exactly?" she countered, her eyes narrowing. "That you've been sleeping with a woman half my age, or that she's now carrying your child? Which part is the lie, Alistair? Be specific." The directness of the question seemed to momentarily stun him. He was used to her diplomacy, her willingness to smooth over his transgressions with a veneer of polite denial. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, a fish gasping for air. "It's complicated," he finally managed a pathetic catch-all phrase that was an admission in itself. "Complicated." Serafina let out a short, mirthless laugh. "No, Alistair. It's actually quite simple. You broke your vows. You humiliated me. And you did it in the most public and vulgar way imaginable." She didn't wait for a reply. The chauffeur had already opened her door, and she swept out of the car and into the private elevator, leaving Alistair to scramble after her. The ascent to the penthouse was swift and silent. The moment the polished bronze doors slid open to reveal their opulent foyer, the pretense of civility evaporated completely. "Serafina." "Listen to me," he pleaded, following her, as she walked purposefully through the gallery-like hall, her heels clicking an angry staccato on the marble floor. "Isabella she's unstable. She's trying to extort me. My legal team is already handling it. It will all go away." She stopped in the center of the vast living room, a space dominated by a floor-to-ceiling window that offered a breathtaking panoramic view of Central Park. The city lights twinkled below, oblivious to the drama unfolding 60 floors above. "You think this is about money?" she asked, turning to face him. Her eyes blazing with a fire he hadn't seen in years. "You think you can just throw your lawyers and your money at this and make it disappear? This isn't a hostile takeover, Alistair. This is my life. Our life." "I know I messed up," he said, his voice softening as he took a step closer. He reached for her, but she recoiled as if his touch were a lit match. "I was lonely. You've been so distant lately, Serafina. It's like living with a beautiful, polite stranger." The audacity of his accusation was staggering. "Distant," she repeated, her voice rising in disbelief. "I've been distant. I've been holding this empire together, while you've been jet-setting around the world, indulging your every whim. I host your dinners, charm your business, partners, manage your charities, and raise our son. When exactly did you have time to feel lonely, Alistair? In between board meetings and your trysts with your unstable mistress. The mention of their son Julian hung in the air between them. Julian, their brilliant, sensitive 20-year-old, was away at Harvard, thankfully shielded from the immediate fallout of the scandal. But Serafina knew it was only a matter of time before the poison reached him. The thought of his pain, of the disillusionment he would feel, was the one thing that truly threatened to break her composure. "Don't bring Julian into this," Alistair warned, his voice low. "He's already in this," she shot back. "He's a Rothschild. Your son. The heir to this circus. How am I supposed to explain this to him? That his father, the man he idolizes, is about to have a child with a B-list actress he read about in a gossip magazine?" The fight raged on a torrent of accusations and recriminations that had been dammed up for years. Every unspoken resentment, every glossed-over indiscretion came flooding out. The cool, collected Mrs. Rothschild was gone, replaced by a woman pushed to her absolute limit. She was no longer fighting for her marriage. She was fighting for her dignity, for the shreds of the woman she had been before she had become a brand. Finally exhausted and emotionally raw, a terrifying clarity washed over her. She looked at the man standing before her, the man she had once loved so fiercely, and she saw a stranger. His pleas for understanding now sounded like hollow excuses. His promises to fix things were the empty assurances of a man who believed his power was limitless. She walked over to the grand piano, a magnificent Steinway she rarely played anymore, and picked up a silver-framed photograph. It was from their wedding day, a black and white image of two young, hopeful people, their faces radiant with joy. She stared at it for a long moment, then set it down with a quiet finality. "I want you to leave, Alistair," she said, her voice eerily calm once more. He stared at her, uncomprehending. "What leave?" "This is my home. It is our home," she corrected him. "And it is no longer a place of peace. I want you to pack a bag and go to one of your hotels. I need space. I need to think." "Serafina, don't be ridiculous," he scoffed, resorting to his usual tactic of belittling her. "We can work through this. We're the Rothschilds. We don't just quit." "I am not quitting," she said, her gaze as hard as steel. "I am surviving." When he made no move to leave, she walked to the intercom system on the wall. "Jeeves," she said, her voice steady. "Please have Mr. Rothschild's driver bring the car back to the garage. He will be leaving for the night." Alistair's face was a mask of fury and disbelief. He was being dismissed from his own home by his own wife. It was a scenario so outside his realm of experience that he was momentarily speechless. He stormed towards the bedroom wing, and she could hear the sounds of drawers being wrenched open and hangers being scraped across a rail. Minutes later, he emerged carrying a small leather holdall. He paused at the door, his arrogance replaced by a flicker of genuine desperation. "Don't do this, Serafina," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Don't throw away 25 years over this." "25 years is why I am doing this," she replied without looking at him. "I've given you 25 years of my life, Alistair. I will not give you one more minute of my self-respect." The heavy door closed behind him with a soft click. a sound that seemed to echo the final definitive closing of a chapter in her life. The silence that descended upon the penthouse was different this time. It wasn't oppressive. It was liberating. For the first time in years, Serafina Rothschild was truly alone. And in that solitude, a new resolve began to form. This was not just about a separation. This was about a reclamation. The next morning, while the city was still buzzing with the news of Alistair's alleged affair, Serafina made a phone call, not to her publicist, not to her friends, but to a name that struck fear into the hearts of New York's most powerful men. Victoria Sterling, the most formidable divorce attorney in the country. Victoria. "It's Serafina Rothschild," she said, her voice clear and resolute. "I'd like to schedule an appointment as soon as possible. I've decided to file for divorce." The news of Serafina's divorce filing hit Alistair like a physical blow. He was in his sprawling office on the top floor of Rothschild Tower, a glass and steel monument to his own success, when his personal lawyer, a man accustomed to dealing with multi-billion-dollar mergers, delivered the news with the grim solemnity of a doctor diagnosing a terminal illness. "She's retained Victoria Sterling, the lawyer, a man named Arthur Vance," said his voice low. The name hung in the air like a guillotine. Victoria Sterling wasn't just a lawyer. She was a predator. She didn't negotiate. She eviscerated. Hiring her was a declaration of war. Alistair sank into his Eames chair, the panoramic view of the city he commanded, suddenly feeling like a cruel joke. He had expected Serafina to be angry. He had expected a period of frosty silence, of sleeping in separate wings of the penthouse. He had even budgeted for a lavish, "I'm sorry" gift. A rare pink diamond, perhaps, or a private island adjacent to their current one. He had, in his monumental arrogance, assumed that their marriage, like everything else in his life, was a business. And in business, every problem had a price. He had never not for a single moment considered that Serafina would actually leave him. The Rothschilds didn't divorce. It was an unwritten rule, a cornerstone of their dynastic image. They weathered storms, they presented a united front, and they handled their indiscretions with quiet, ruthless efficiency. For Serafina to break with this tradition was not just a personal rejection. It was an act of treason against the empire he had built. "Get her on the phone," Alistair snapped, his voice a low growl. "She's not taking your calls." "Alistair," Arthur replied, already anticipating the command. "All communications are to go through Ms. Sterling's office." Alistair slammed his fist on the vast mahogany desk, the impact rattling a series of awards and family photos. Rage, pure and unadulterated, surged through him. It was an emotion he rarely felt. Frustration, yes. Impatience often. But rage was inefficient. It clouded judgment. Now, however, it was all he could feel. How dared she, after everything he had given her? The lifestyle, the prestige, the name. He had plucked her from relative obscurity, a beautiful art history student, and made her a queen. And this was his reward. His initial fury soon gave way to a cold, unfamiliar spike of fear. This wasn't just about his image. It was about Serafina. He thought back to the night of the gala, to the chilling calmness in her eyes as she'd told him to leave. He had mistaken her composure for weakness, for a prelude to eventual forgiveness. He saw now that it was something far more dangerous resolve. He began a frantic, desperate campaign to win her back, a campaign that was as ill-conceived as it was pathetic. He sent a truckload of her favorite flowers, rare black baccarat roses, to the penthouse. They were sent back untouched. He had a custom-designed necklace from Cartier, featuring an emerald the size of a robin's egg, delivered by special courier. The box was returned unopened, with a crisp note from Victoria Sterling's office, stating that Mrs. Rothschild was not accepting any gifts. He tried to leverage their son Julian. He called him at Harvard, his voice a carefully calibrated mix of paternal concern and wounded pride. "Your mother isn't thinking clearly, son," he'd said. "She's been under a lot of stress. This unpleasantness with Ms. Ricci is just a misunderstanding. But your mother has blown it out of all proportion. She won't listen to me. Maybe she'll listen to you." The call did not go as planned. Julian, who had inherited his mother's quiet intelligence and moral clarity, was not so easily manipulated. "I spoke to Mum this morning, Dad." Julian replied, his voice cold, with a disappointment that cut Alistair deeper than any anger could have. "She told me everything." "How could you, after everything she's done for this family for you? Don't ask me to be your mediator. You made this mess. You fix it." The world that had once bent to Alistair's will was now refusing to yield. His board of directors, once a rubber stamp for his every decision, called an emergency meeting. The scandal was affecting the stock price. The family values brand that the Rothschild Foundation so carefully cultivated was now a laughingstock. They demanded a statement, a plan, a swift resolution. For the first time in his professional life, Alistair felt the icy grip of his own vulnerability. Meanwhile, the media frenzy was relentless. Isabella Ricci, far from being the unstable and easily managed problem Alistair had claimed, was proving to be a masterful player in the court of public opinion. She gave a tearful, exclusive interview to a major television network, painting herself as a naive young woman, swept off her feet by a powerful, manipulative older man. She spoke of his promises of a future together, of the child he had supposedly desperately wanted. "He told me his marriage was a sham," she whispered, dabbing at a perfectly timed tear with a tissue. "A business arrangement. He said his heart wasn't in it anymore. He said he loved me." Every word was a carefully crafted dagger aimed at Serafina, designed to paint her as the cold, unloving wife who had driven her husband into the arms of another. But the public, for the most part, wasn't buying it. Serafina's years of quiet dignity, her unwavering support of numerous charities, and her reputation for genuine kindness had built a formidable reserve of goodwill. She was seen as the wronged party, the classy wife who had been publicly humiliated. Her silence in the face of the scandal only amplified her mystique and her perceived strength. Desperate and running out of options, Alistair decided on a final dramatic gesture. He knew that Serafina always walked her beloved Borzoi Caspian in a small private park near the penthouse every morning at precisely 7 a.m. It was a ritual that had been sacrosanct for years. He arrived before she did, dismissing his driver and standing in the crisp morning air, a man completely out of his element. He was used to being insulated from the world, ferried from one air-conditioned environment to another. Here among the dog walkers and early morning joggers, he was just another man. When he saw her approaching a tall, elegant figure in tailored trousers and a cashmere sweater, his heart lurched. She looked different. Freed from the weight of his expectations, she seemed lighter, her posture more relaxed, a subtle smile playing on her lips as she watched Caspian chase a squirrel. He stepped out from behind a large oak tree, blocking her path. "Serafina," he said, his voice raw. She stopped, her hand tightening on the leash. Her face, which had been so serene, hardened into a mask of polite indifference. "Alistair, you shouldn't be here." "I had to see you," he said, taking a step forward. "I can't do this. I can't live without you. You seemed to be doing a fine job of it a few months ago." She retorted, her voice dripping with ice. "That was a mistake. The biggest mistake of my life," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "I was a fool. I was arrogant. I took you for granted. I know that now." He took another step, and then in a move that would be captured by a long-lens paparazzi camera and splashed across the front page of every newspaper the next day, the titan of industry, the man who moved markets with a single phone call, fell to his knees on the damp grass of the park. "Please, Serafina," he begged, his voice choked with a desperation that was shockingly real. He reached out and grabbed her hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "Don't leave me. Forgive me. We can fix this. I'll do anything. I'll end things with Isabella. I'll make a public apology. I'll give you anything you want." Serafina looked down at the man kneeling before her, the great Alistair Rothschild on his knees. It was a sight she had never imagined. She would see. A part of her, the part that still remembered the young man she had fallen in love with, felt a flicker of pity. But it was quickly extinguished by the cold, hard reality of his betrayal. She slowly, deliberately pulled her hand from his grasp. "It's too late, Alistair," she said, her voice soft but unwavering. "You're not begging for me. You're begging for your company, for your reputation, for your empire. You broke something between us that can't be fixed with apologies or expensive gifts. You broke my trust." She looked at him one last time, a man reduced to a desperate, pathetic figure. "Get up, Alistair," she said, her voice devoid of malice, filled only with a profound and unshakable finality. "You're making a scene." Without another word, she turned and walked away. Her elegant stride never faltering, leaving the billionaire kneeling alone in the morning dew, the ruins of his perfect life scattered around him. While Alistair was busy orchestrating his futile campaign of contrition, Serafina was moving with the quiet, calculated precision of a chess grandmaster. Her meetings with Victoria Sterling were not tearful, emotional affairs. They were strategy sessions. Victoria, a woman with a razor-sharp mind and a wardrobe to match, was immediately impressed by her new client's composure and clarity. "Most women in your position are a wreck," Victoria had noted during their first meeting. Her office a minimalist expanse of glass and steel overlooking the East River. They're either screaming for revenge or drowning in Chardonnay. You're different. You're focused. I've had a long time to prepare for this, even if I didn't know it." Serafina had replied, her hands resting calmly on the polished table. "My goal is not revenge, Victoria. It is a clean, quiet, and fair dissolution of a partnership. But make no mistake, I will not be taken for a fool." Serafina provided Victoria with a comprehensive overview of the Rothschild assets, not just the publicly declared holdings, but the intricate web of offshore accounts, shell corporations and private equity ventures that Alistair had always managed with obsessive secrecy. For years, while Alistair had seen her as a decorative, compliant wife, Serafina had been paying attention. She had read the financial reports he left on his desk. She had listened to his late-night phone calls, and she had made it her business to understand the empire she had helped build. "He thinks my name is just a social asset," Serafina explained. "But the Rothschild Foundation, which I have single-handedly run for 2 decades, holds a significant and often overlooked portfolio of art and real estate. My prenuptial agreement is 25 years old. I suspect it won't hold up well against his recent moral failings." Victoria's thin lips had curved into a predatory smile. "Oh, this is going to be delightful," she had purred. While the legal battle was being sharpened behind the scenes, a new and unexpected development began to cast doubt on the central claim of the scandal. Genevieve Serafina's fiercely loyal art dealer friend had decided to do some digging of her own. Genevieve had a network of contacts that rivaled the CIA, a web of artists, gallery owners, socialites, and gossips who saw and heard everything. "Something about this Ricci girl stinks," Genevieve had said over lunch at a discreet restaurant downtown. She came out of nowhere. One minute she's doing off-Broadway plays. Nobody's ever heard of the next. She's on the arm of a billionaire. It's too neat. Genevieve's instincts were as usual impeccable. She started by making inquiries within the acting community. The feedback was consistent. Isabella Ricci wasn't known for her talent, but for her ambition. She was what they called a climber. Someone who was always looking for an angle, a shortcut to the top. The first major crack in Isabella's story came from an unlikely source, a disgruntled former personal assistant. The young woman who had been fired for a minor infraction was more than happy to talk to Genevieve's private investigator. Pregnant. Please, the assistant had scoffed. She's been talking about trapping some rich guy with a baby bump for years. It was her plan A. She keeps a collection of fake silicone bellies in her closet, different sizes for different trimesters. She called them her little helpers. This was a bombshell. But it was hearsay. They needed proof. The proof came from a more technical angle. Victoria Sterling's legal team, acting on the tip, subpoenaed medical records from the exclusive Los Angeles clinic, where Isabella had supposedly had her first ultrasound. At first, the clinic, citing patient confidentiality, refused, but under the threat of severe legal penalties, they complied. The records were a mess. The dates were inconsistent. The doctor who had supposedly signed off on the initial report was on vacation in Fiji on the day of the alleged appointment. Most damningly, the ultrasound image that Isabella's team had strategically leaked to a friendly tabloid was found to be a stock image readily available for purchase on the internet. It was a fake. Simultaneously, Alistair, now in a state of near total panic, was conducting his own frantic investigation. The public humiliation of kneeling in the park had been a turning point. His desperation was no longer just about losing Serafina. It was about being played for a fool. His ego, the driving force of his entire existence, could not stand it. He sicked his own team of ruthless corporate investigators on Isabella's life. They were men who normally specialized in hostile takeovers and corporate espionage, and they tore through Isabella's carefully constructed facade with brutal efficiency. They uncovered a history of petty scams, of affairs with wealthy men, of a trail of debt and broken promises. And then they found the smoking gun. They unearthed a series of encrypted text messages between Isabella and a man named Marco Valenti. Valenti was a small-time actor, and as it turned out, Isabella's long-term on-again, off-again boyfriend. The messages were a detailed chronicle of their entire scheme. Marco. He's really buying this. The baby Isabella, like a fish on a hook. He's so arrogant, he can't imagine anyone would dare to lie to him. Thinks I'm just some dumb actress in awe of his big bank account. Marco. When do we get paid? I'm tired of this dump. Isabella, patience, my love. First the scandal, then the divorce. He'll pay me millions to go away quietly and not disrupt the proceedings. He'll see it as a business expense. We'll be in Tuscany by Christmas. The messages were a cold-blooded blueprint for extortion. There was no baby. There was no affair of the heart. It was a meticulously planned con, and Alistair Rothschild had been the mark. Alistair sat in his lawyer's office, staring at the printed transcripts of the texts, a cold, sickening rage building in his stomach. He had been played. His pursuit of Isabella, which he had seen as a thrilling ego-stroking dalliance, had been a calculated trap. He had risked his marriage, his company, and his reputation for a lie. His first instinct was to destroy Isabella, to leak the texts, to sue her into oblivion, to ensure she would never work in Hollywood or anywhere else ever again. Arthur Vance, his lawyer, strongly advised against it. If you do that, you admit to the world that you were gullible enough to be conned by a C-list actress. Arthur said, his tone blunt. It makes you look weak, foolish. And it doesn't solve your primary problem, Serafina. Right now she's divorcing you for infidelity. That makes you a cunt, but a powerful, virile one. If this comes out, she'll be divorcing you for being a monumental idiot. Which do you think is worse for the Rothschild brand? Alistair saw the cold, hard logic in the advice. But he was trapped. He had the evidence to expose Isabella, but doing so would mean admitting the full, humiliating scope of his own stupidity. He had one last card to play. He had to get this information to Serafina. He had to prove to her that while he had been a fool, he had not in the strictest sense been unfaithful in the way she imagined. He believed with the last shred of his desperate hope that this truth could be his salvation. He thought that by proving the pregnancy was a lie, he could somehow undo the damage, rewind the clock. He sent a copy of the entire investigation, the ex-assistant's testimony, the fake ultrasound analysis, and the damning text messages in a sealed envelope to Serafina, delivered by a trusted courier directly to the penthouse. He included a single handwritten note. Serafina, I was a fool, but I was not the father of a child that never existed. This was all a lie. Please let me explain. Alistair. He waited, imagining her reading the documents, the shock, the realization. He pictured her calling him, perhaps not with forgiveness, but with a new understanding, a willingness to talk. He was as ever completely wrong about what she would do next. Serafina sat in her sun-drenched study, the file spread out on her antique desk. She read every word with a calm, detached focus. She felt no shock, no surprise. In a way, she had known all along that the truth would be something sordid and transactional. It was, after all, Alistair's world. When she finished reading, she didn't feel relief. She didn't feel a renewed sense of hope for her marriage. She felt a profound and weary sadness. She looked at Alistair's note, at his desperate, looping handwriting. He still didn't get it. He thought the core of his betrayal was the baby. He thought that by proving the child was a fiction, he could erase his sin. He failed to understand that the betrayal was not the consequence, but the act itself. The lies, the sneaking around, the willingness to seek comfort and excitement in the arms of another woman. The fact that he had been so easily duped by a transparent schemer didn't make him less guilty. It simply made him pathetic. She picked up the phone, but she didn't call Alistair. She called Victoria Sterling. Victoria, she said, her voice as clear as a bell. I have some new information. It seems Mr. Rothschild was the victim of an elaborate hoax. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Well, Victoria said, a hint of amusement in her voice. This certainly changes things. This is excellent leverage. We can destroy him in the court of public opinion. He'll give you anything to make this go away. No, Serafina said firmly. We will not be using this information at all." Victoria was silent for a moment, genuinely surprised. "I don't understand." "This is the ace up your sleeve." "This was never about leverage," Serafina explained, her gaze drifting out the window to the endless sky. "And it was never about the baby. It was about the breach of trust. This information doesn't change that. It only deepens it. Leaking this would only create a bigger, uglier circus, and I will not subject my son or myself to that. It would make me a party to their squalid little drama." She took a deep breath. "We proceed with the divorce as planned. Quietly, cleanly, and decisively. This information is to remain private. Alistair's humiliation is his own business. My dignity is mine." In that moment, Serafina Rothschild wasn't just filing for divorce. She was seizing control of the narrative, refusing to be defined by her husband's scandal, whether it was real or fabricated. She was choosing a path of quiet strength, a path that Alistair, with all his power and wealth, was utterly incapable of understanding. The war was not over, but she had already won the battle that mattered most, the one for her own soul. The stage for the final act was not a courtroom, but the place where it had all begun, the sprawling Fifth Avenue penthouse. Alistair, having received no response to his bombshell evidence, had grown increasingly frantic. He had finally, through a combination of begging and veiled threats to his own legal team, managed to secure what Victoria Sterling had icily termed a final settlement meeting. He was under the delusion that this was his chance to reconcile, to use the truth about Isabella's scam to win Serafina back. Serafina had agreed to the meeting for one reason only: to sign the papers and sever the final tie. She wanted it done in her home, on her terms, a final symbolic act of reclaiming her space. He arrived looking haggard. The past few weeks had taken a visible toll. His bespoke suit seemed to hang off him, and there were dark circles under his eyes that no amount of money could conceal. He walked into the living room, a space that was once so familiar, and found Serafina standing by the window, silhouetted against the setting sun. She was wearing a simple, elegant, cream-colored dress, and she looked breathtakingly serene. Victoria Sterling and Arthur Vance were seated at opposite ends of a large glass table, a mountain of paperwork separating them like a miniature range of the Alps. Serafina Alistair began, his voice raspy. He ignored the lawyers completely. "Did you get the file I sent?" "Did you see I did?" she said, turning to face him. Her expression was placid, giving nothing away. A wave of relief washed over his face. "So you see, it was all a lie. A scam. I was an idiot, I admit it. A complete fool. But there's no baby. There was never going to be a baby. It changes everything, doesn't it?" Serafina looked at him, and for the first time she felt a profound sense of pity. He was like a child who had broken a priceless vase and thought that by hiding the pieces he could make the vase whole again. "No, Alistair," she said, her voice soft but firm. "It changes nothing." His face fell. "What? How can you say that I didn't betray you in the way you thought? It was a con." "Oh, you betrayed me," she said, taking a step towards him. "Don't for a second think you didn't. You think the betrayal was a hypothetical child. The betrayal, Alistair, was every lie you told me for the past year. It was every late night you blamed on work. It was every secret trip to Los Angeles. It was the fact that you looked for solace and excitement, not with me, but with a cheap, transparent fraud like Isabella Ricci." She picked up the file from a side table. "This," she said, Holding it up doesn't absolve you. It condemns you. It proves that you were willing to risk our 25 years, our son's happiness, and the reputation of this family, for a woman who was playing you for a fool. It doesn't make you less of a cheat, Alistair. It just makes you a stupid one." Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, puncturing his ego, his denial, his last desperate hope. He stared at her, speechless. "You came here today thinking this information was your get-out-of-jail-free card," she continued, her voice rising with a controlled passion. "You thought you could wave this file in my face, and I would be so relieved there wasn't a baby that I'd forget everything else. You still don't see me, do you, after all these years? You see a business partner, an asset, something to be managed. You have no idea who I am." She threw the file down on the table between the lawyers. "And for the record, your little problem is about to solve itself." As if on cue, Victoria Sterling's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, a flicker of triumph in her eyes. She looked at Alistair. "It seems Ms. Ricci has a new benefactor. She was just photographed in Monaco on the yacht of Russian oligarch Dmitry Volkov. The story breaking now is that she has, quote, tragically miscarried her baby. She's already spinning a new tale of heartbreak and resilience. She has moved on, Alistair. Your sordid little secret is safe not because of your power, but because your mistress found a richer mark." The news that Isabella had so quickly and easily discarded him for another billionaire was the final crushing humiliation. He had been nothing more than a stepping stone. He looked from Victoria's smug face to Serafina's pitying one, and the full weight of his failure crashed down on him. "I loved you, Serafina," he whispered the words, sounding hollow even to himself. "Somewhere under all of this I did." "I know," she said, and the sadness in her voice was genuine. "I loved you too. But we are not those people anymore, and I cannot live my life mourning a ghost." She walked to the table and picked up a pen. With a steady hand, she began to sign the divorce papers, her signature a fluid, decisive stroke on each page. The sound of the pen on the thick paper was the only sound in the room, a quiet, definitive end to an era. When she was finished, she pushed the stack towards Arthur Vance. "Your turn, Alistair," she said softly. He looked at the papers, at her signature, at the cold, black-and-white finality of it all. This was it. The end of his marriage. The fracturing of his empire. The loss of the one person who had been his anchor, whether he had appreciated it or not. He stumbled forward and collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. A dry, ragged sob escaped him. The great Alistair Rothschild broken, not by a market crash or a corporate raider, but by his own profound and irreparable folly. Arthur Vance, ever the pragmatist, gently pushed the papers in front of his client. "Alistair," he said quietly, "you need to sign." Slowly, like a man moving underwater. Alistair raised his head. He picked up the pen. His hand trembled as he signed his name, his own signature, usually a bold, confident slash, now looking like the scrawl of a broken man. It was done. Serafina watched him for a long moment. There was no triumph in her, only a vast, aching emptiness. She had won. She was free. But the price had been the life she had known for a quarter of a century. She turned and walked out of the room, not looking back. She went to her bedroom, the one she had already redecorated, purging it of his presence. She walked out onto the private terrace and breathed in the cool night air. The city glittered below her, a universe of 1,000,000 lights, 1,000,000 stories. Her own story was finally, truly her own. The cage, however gilded, was open, and she was ready to fly. In the months that followed the signing of the divorce papers, the world of the Rothschilds underwent a seismic shift. The divorce was finalized with an uncharacteristic lack of public drama. Victoria Sterling, true to her word, and Serafina's wishes, had negotiated a settlement that was both staggering in its scope and utterly private in its details. Serafina retained the Fifth Avenue penthouse, the Rothschild Foundation, and a significant portion of the art collection she had so lovingly curated over the years. More importantly, she retained her dignity. Alistair, true to form, tried to spin the narrative. His PR machine put out a statement about an amicable parting of ways and a mutual decision to move forward as friends and co-parents. But the pictures of him kneeling in the park and the stories of his public desperation had already cemented a different reality in the public's mind. He had become a cautionary tale, a symbol of powerful men brought low by their own hubris. His business empire, while still vast, had lost its sheen of invincibility. The stock price stabilized, but the magic was gone. The name Rothschild now carried with it a faint whiff of scandal and foolishness. He retreated from the public eye, becoming a near recluse in one of his many properties, a sprawling, lonely estate in the Hamptons. He was surrounded by wealth, but devoid of the one thing he now realized. He craved the genuine partnership and quiet strength that Serafina had provided. He occasionally saw his son Julian, but their interactions were strained, freighted with the weight of Julian's deep disappointment. Isabella Ricci, as predicted, flamed out spectacularly. Her dalliance with Dmitry Volkov was short-lived, ending when the oligarch's formidable wife discovered the affair. She found herself back in Los Angeles, her 15 minutes of fame having expired. The notoriety she had gained from the Rothschild scandal now worked against her. No serious director would cast her, and the wealthy men she had once targeted now saw her as toxic. She was a con artist who had been exposed not by the media, but by the quiet, unassailable dignity of the woman she had tried to destroy. And Serafina flourished. She threw herself into the work of the Rothschild Foundation with a renewed vigor and a clear, singular vision. Freed from the constraints of being Alistair's wife, she became a formidable force in her own right. She shifted the foundation's focus, moving away from the glitzy, high society galas and towards more impactful, hands-on projects. She funded shelters for women escaping domestic abuse, established scholarships for underprivileged female students in business and finance, and created a mentorship program that paired established female leaders with young women just starting their careers. She sold the famous Rothschild sapphire. The auction at Sotheby's was a global event, and the necklace fetched an astronomical price. Serafina donated every last penny to the new branches of her foundation. When a journalist asked why she had sold such a legendary piece, her answer was simple and direct. "It was a beautiful piece of jewelry," she said, her smile genuine and relaxed. "But it represented a part of my life that is over. I'd rather its value be used to build futures than to adorn my neck. My past is not for sale, but my future is my own to create." The Fifth Avenue penthouse, once a silent, lonely palace, was now filled with life and laughter. She hosted salons for artists, thinkers, and activists. She had intimate dinners with a close circle of friends, including the ever-loyal Genevieve. She traveled not for scheduled appearances, but for herself. She went on archaeological digs in Egypt, hiked in Patagonia, and revisited the small art gallery in Paris, where she had first met a young, ambitious man with a spark in his eye. She felt a pang of nostalgia, but no regret. One evening, about a year after the divorce, she was hosting a small gathering. Julian was home from Harvard for the weekend, and he had brought a friend, a bright young woman, studying international law. The sound of intelligent conversation and easy laughter filled the room. Serafina watched her son, saw the man he was becoming honorable, kind, and with a deep respect for women that his father had so sorely lacked. Genevieve came to stand beside her, a glass of champagne in her hand. "Look at you," Genevieve said, her voice soft. "You're happy." Serafina smiled, a real unguarded smile that reached her eyes. "I am," she said. "It's a different kind of happiness than I expected. It's quieter. But it's mine." She was no longer Mrs. Alastair Rothschild, the billionaire's wife. She was Serafina Rothschild, a philanthropist, a mother, a leader, a woman who had walked through the fire of public humiliation and private heartbreak, and had emerged not just intact, but stronger, purer, and finally, truly free. The gilded cage was a memory, and in its place she had built a legacy. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of betrayal, resilience, and ultimate triumph. The story of Serafina Rothschild proves that true power isn't measured in billions of dollars or front-page headlines, but in the unshakable strength of one's own character. It's a reminder that even when your world shatters, you have the power to rebuild it, stronger and more beautiful than before. If Serafina's story moved you, please hit that like button to let us know. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own inner strength. And for more real-life dramas that will keep you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. What did you think of Alastair's ultimate downfall? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one. Until next time, stay strong and write your own story.